Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. 80 years ago, the UN Charter was signed, founding the United Nations. It embodied the agreement to maintain international peace and security, to respect human rights and uphold international law. However, today we all witness horrifying humanitarian consequences of 3 years of ongoing Russia's full-scale, unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. Russia, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, aided by Belarus, Iran, North Korea, and others, has brought back aggression to the European continent in total disregard for international law, at the core of which stands the UN Charter. Russia continues to deliberately attack thousands of innocent civilians, including children, and cause wide-scale destruction of Ukraine's civilian, critical, and energy infrastructure. Every day, numerous international crimes are committed by Russia. Widespread and systematic torture of civilians and prisoners of war, extrajudicial executions, arbitrary detention and sexual violence, unlawful forcible transfer and deportation of Ukrainian civilians, including children. The fate of transferred or deported children also includes the illegal adoption, indoctrination, and militarization with genocidal aim of erasing the national Ukrainian identity. There can be no just, lasting, and sustainable peace without holding Russia's political and military leadership accountable for international crimes, including the crime of aggression against Ukraine. We, the international community, have collective responsibility to restore credibility of international law and combat impunity in order a strong legal precedent is set for the future. We urge all states to step up efforts to establish strong and effective special international tribunal that enjoys broad cross-regional support and is empowered to bring real justice for the crime of aggression against Ukraine and ensure accountability of those having the greatest power. Excellencies, the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Russia has confirmed that repression at home goes hand in hand with Russia's aggression abroad. Human rights violations in Russia against its own population have increasingly intensified since aggression against Ukraine. Systemic, violent crackdown on civil society, independent media, human rights defenders, lawyers, and persons belonging to minorities helped Putin to create an environment in which human rights and human dignity are completely disregarded. The situation in Russia deserves more international attention and should remain high on the Human Rights Council agenda. Another example of massive and systematic human rights violations is Belarus, where Lukashenko recently reappointed himself president for the 7th term in a row. Intimidation, repression, and persecution of Belarusians at home and in exile have reached unprecedented levels, possibly amounting to crimes against humanity. More than 1,200 political prisoners remain behind the bars in Belarus and are subjected to torture and other ill treatment. We call for the immediate and unconditional release and effective rehabilitation. Alongside brutal repressions against Belarusians, Lukashenko also willingly continues to enable Russia's aggression against Ukraine. He also does not shy away from exploiting the already vulnerable migrants and instrumentalizes them for political purposes. Belarusian authorities must be held accountable for international crimes they have committed. Lithuania has referred the situation in Belarus to the International Criminal Court concerning alleged crimes against humanity, including forceful deportation, and we call on other states to join our referral. Distinguished audience, we are also seriously concerned about the general downslide in the protection of human rights and the pushback against universally agreed human rights standards. We regret the rapidly deteriorating human rights situation in Georgia a current member of the Human Rights Council. Georgian authorities resort to threats, excessive use of force, unjustified arrests, and delayed legal proceedings against its citizens who exercise the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression. This raises into question Georgia's adherence to its international human rights commitments and requires an adequate response from the Council. Lithuania also deplores the serious human rights situation in Afghanistan, especially that of women and girls, amounting to gender persecution. We also reiterate our serious concerns about consistently lamentable situation of human rights in North Korea, Iran, and China. We also expect a swift and full implementation of ceasefire agreement in Gaza with permanent end of hostilities and release of all the hostages. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, after 80 years, we find ourselves in an alarming situation again. It is our collective responsibility to recommit to the UN Charter and full respect for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Lithuania remains firmly committed to upholding the universality, indivisibility, and interdependence of all human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. We have always regarded these universally adopted values and principles as an indispensable prerequisite for peace, security, freedom, and prosperity. Lithuania is open to cooperation for the protection of the rule-based international order and supports all efforts to ensure accountability for breaches of international law. Only by working together, we can ensure that human rights can be enjoyed by everyone and that no one is left behind. Thank you.